Hello, and welcome back to Kingdom Tales. I'm Father Lee, and I invite you to join me as we continue reading from The Tales of the Kingdom by David and Karen Maines. Have you ever done something wrong and then had to admit to it? Maybe it was to a parent or to a friend or to somebody that you cared about. Do you remember that feeling in your stomach when you have to go to somebody and tell the truth, and you worry that maybe they're going to be very mad at you, or maybe that you're going to get in trouble, or maybe that they're not going to care about you the way that they did before? Sometimes when we do something wrong and we need to tell God the truth about what we've done, we can have those same feelings. Feelings like He's going to be mad at us. Feelings like He's going to punish us. Feelings like He's not going to love us anymore. But before we read our story today, I want you to stop what you're doing and listen to me. Okay? So whatever you've got in your hands, whatever you're doing to keep yourself busy, put it down for just a minute and listen very carefully. There is nothing that you can ever do that will make God stop loving you. Nothing at all. Nothing in the whole world could change the way that God loves you. God will always come to find you. God will always come to rescue you. You never should be afraid of God, of telling Him the truth. He will always only love you. All right, you can pick your things back up now. Today's story is called Trial by Fire. Not long ago, 2 children in Great Park made a quest. A boy who sought a way to walk through the thing he dreaded most, and a girl who feared she had lost the one she loved most. And together they discovered a kingdom within and without, which all do who have the courage to make the quest. The war of fire had been won, but a terrible feeling of evil permeated Great Park. Dark things seemed to lurk in every shadow and behind every tree and bush. "Oh, mercy, it's all my fault," Amanda cried after she had returned to the safety of Caretaker's cottage. "I did it. I disobeyed. Great Park has suffered because of me. We will never be the same, never." Mercy rocked the blistered child in her arms and wept too. She offered the girl the healing draught and applied a poultice. She prayed for King's love. But Amanda did not receive any comfort. A raw wound festered deep in her soul. Later that night, Hero hurried to the Ranger Lodge, where council had been called. Caretaker, not the Ranger commander, stood on the platform since there had not been time for becoming. But the elderly man's eyes flashed bold in the old way. Not one Ranger doubted who it was in command. "I know you are weary," Caretaker shouted loud enough that those in the back of the hall could hear. "We're all weary. Battle is never in the heart of a peaceful people. We all long for peace. The war of fire has been won, but now our work begins. The evil ones may come again to Great Park. Protection has been breached. There will be no rest for protectors. More care is required after disasters. The burners and naysayers will grasp any opportunity to take advantage. Watch must be doubled. Our diligence must be threefold." The old man stopped. Hero watched as he lowered his head. He looked worn, ancient, and a little foolish. But the boy loved him with his whole heart. "We must take time for a ceremony of purity. If any lust for battle has entered your heart, if any love of leaping flames or any shadow has lodged in your soul, it must be called out. No advantage shall be given to the enemy by protectors. None." Caretaker lifted his hands, which were gnarled and veined in invitation. "Come," he called, "renew your vows to the king. There will be no great celebration until the danger is over." Hero watched as the men and women bowed their heads. Silence settled down upon the hall like a great winged bird that smothers all noise beneath its soft down breast. The press of quiet was awesome. Some went to their knees. Some stood with tears streaming down their cheeks. Hero thought about the viewing circle where he had seen the faithless ranger revealed. The boy listened to his own soul. Flames flickered in his mind. An old wound throbbed. Hero heard footsteps across the wood floor, coming from the far back. Then the sound of other footsteps from another place, and more and more and more. "I'm for the king and for the restoration," said one. The voice was strong. "I'm for the king and for the restoration," said the next, and on and on. As the boy listened, he realized he too was for the king. There was no other place he desired to be, no other way he wanted to live his life. He made a deep vow. "I will find the courage to walk into the sacred flames. I will become part of the great celebration." But he did not follow the others to the front of the hall, for now the vow was enough. Still, Hero knew that someday he too must walk to meet the king. Until then, his quest would not be over. For weeks, the rangers kept double watch. They mended the breaches in the forest. The ring of acres devastated by the war of fire was cleared to wait for spring, when Caretaker would speak the magic of greening and blooming. Protectors hunted out the shadows that lurked, and the king's men chanted the king's name into the darkness to scare away any evil ones. Hero volunteered to climb the watchtowers to relieve those suffering from fatigue. He worked with crews cutting out smoldering trees. He didn't know when or where his scorched heart had turned young again, but it had. After a while he joined the rangers as they began to sing on their marches through deepest forest. As soon as the ranger cries returned to half-hour intervals rather than the quarter-hour watches. "How goes the world? The world goes not well. The kingdom comes." The call sounded out safety. The boy felt secure. Finally, Great Park returned to what it had been. Men and women went back to fields and crafts and forests. Once again there was time to listen to the call of birds and to notice bees humming and to watch the sky stained pink each dawn. Plans began to be made for the first great celebration since the War of Fire. Spring had come. Children reminded each other of dragon egg hunts. In all this time, neither Hero nor Amanda saw the king. Hero wished they had, for Amanda continued to be sick and wane. What was wrong with her anyway? Under Mercy's care, her burns had healed. Miraculously, she was not even scarred. One day, Hero came upon her sitting on the step of Caretaker's cottage. From far away, he could tell that she was spitting at stones. "Ha!" he shouted at her as he approached. "Practicing your aim?" Startled, she stood. "Leave me alone," she shouted. "Why don't you all just leave me alone?" She kicked a raccoon that was curled in the sun beside her. "Stop looking at me," she sneered. "You're all ugly. I can't stand the look of your scarred face. Mercy's an old crone caretaker's creepy. I don't want to see any of you." And with that, she stormed into Caretaker's cottage. Hero could hear her topple a chair, stamp across the room, and then bang a door. He remembered the Amanda he had once known, and did not at all like what she had become. Maybe slaying dragons was no business for a princess. At any rate, she seemed to be a princess no longer. Hero stomped his foot, angrily turning to go. "Hero," Mercy called. She'd been working in her herb garden and had heard every word. The boy turned toward her. She smiled and stepped between the mounds of fragrant rosemary and thyme. "You're wondering what's wrong with Amanda. She's trying to bear her own guilt. It's a burden too heavy for anyone to carry." "She called me ugly," said Hero, surprised at how much it hurt him. In Enchanted City, he got used to people calling him Scarboy. "Am I really ugly, Mercy?" Mercy handed him a trowel, and the two knelt under the sun and began to dig together in the rich soil. "No," said the old woman. "You are a handsome, strong lad, but Amanda, well, Amanda has loved something more than the king. Whenever that happens, seeing becomes dimmed, and we see without any real sight. All things seem ugly, most of all ourselves." Hero noticed the wonderful spikes of the chive. "What will help her? Will she ever be herself?" Mercy pinched back the parsley. "The king can help her. When we walk through the sacred flames, we always become what we really are. Amanda needs to go back to him at the great celebration. The cure for disobedience is to obey again." Hero thought about his own unfulfilled vow. "Is she afraid of the sacred flames?" he asked. The old woman looked at him. She smiled and almost laughed. "You are afraid of the sacred flames. Amanda is afraid of the king. She's afraid that he will banish her because she's been faithless." Mercy looked far away, as though she was seeing something far off. We all have to walk through the thing we fear most in order to gain the thing that we want most. What do you want most, Hero? Hero knew. He remembered a young man's laugh, felt the brush of a brown beggar's cloak. He thought of a shadowy form singing softly, moving among the outcasts. He felt his two hands holding the strong tug of a woodcutter's saw. He saw a beautiful man dancing behind a leaping wall of sacred flames and heard the music of great celebration. He saw a king standing fearlessly in the middle of the war of fire. Hero wanted to serve this man. He wanted to serve him with all his heart and mind and soul. Mercy whispered, as though she had been reading his thoughts, "Go to him. You will find him at the great celebration. Take Amanda with you. When we walk through the sacred flames for the sake of another, it's never so fearful." But Amanda would not attend the great celebration. She became angry when he asked. If she was inside, she slammed doors. If she was outside, she threw stones. Finally, Hero appealed to her sympathy. "Please, Amanda, I'm afraid of the flames. Go with me. Help me." "Go with Mercy," she spat back, "or with Caretaker. There's hundreds of others to make entrance with you." Hero persisted. "No, I want you to go with me. For your sake, Amanda, how can you stand to be so far from the king?" At that, Amanda melted. It was true. She yearned to see the king, even if he sent her away. She wept. "Oh, Hero, he'll banish me. I've always been his little princess, but look at me. I'm a princess no more. Still, I will go with you." So the two went. The boy who had escaped the darkness because he loved light more than he knew, and the girl who had become ordinary because she did not realize how wonderful it was to be a princess. A light wind ruffled the leaves in deepest forest that night. The children could hear the music of Inmost Circle from afar. Amanda grabbed Hero's arm and put her hand to her throat. "Oh, Hero, what if he doesn't speak to me at all? What if he pretends I'm not there?" For the first time since they had met, it was the boy who drew her on, leading her by the hand. They approached the great clearing. Rangers stood in blue cloaks around the sacred flames, which were leaping higher and higher. Yet something was odd. No one was singing. No one was dancing. Amanda let out a low moan. "Oh no, they're all waiting for us." It was true. All the subjects of the kingdom were standing in small circles, talking to each other as they waited. And the king? The king, with hands crossed behind him, his hair glinting with gold, his robes and garments white and gold-flecked, walked back and forth within the ring of flames. Amanda turned to go, but Hero grabbed her by the elbows. He was determined that her agony should end. They approached the sacred flames. The two knelt at the edge before a ranger. From the bottom of his very being, Hero uttered his vow. "To the king, to the restoration." Amanda was weeping, but she managed to repeat the words. "To the king, to the restoration." Hero turned toward the flames. He could feel the heat on his face. But instead of terror, a joy rose within him. He was anxious to meet the beautiful king waiting for him on the other side. He was determined to be a part of the kingdom. He was absolutely convinced that Amanda should know king's love again. The two made entrance. One moment a dimming, then passage. A great shout went up from the other celebrants. It rang through the night, out through deepest forest, loud enough for all of Great Park to hear. Princess Amanda had come back. The boy Hero had carried her through the thing he feared the most. The two children rushed toward the king, who was already moving toward them. Mercy, beautiful beyond imagining, Ranger, Commander, all came running. They met each other, they embraced, they called each other's names. Amanda wept as she looked up at the king. "I thought you would never want to see me again." The king wiped away her tears, but she wept all the more. All her sorrows tumbled out. "I disobeyed, I lied, I cursed Caretaker in my heart, I loved a forbidden thing, I brought fire into Great Park. Everyone has suffered because of me. Send me away. I don't deserve king's love." The king folded the weeping child into his arms. "Don't leave me, Amanda," he whispered. "We've all been so lonely without you." Between sobs, the girl spoke. I know I can never be a princess again. Just, I want to be your subject and obey." "Look, Amanda," said the king. "Look at what you have become." Amanda glanced down. She was wearing a beautiful new gown. She lifted the folds of her skirt. There were pearls at the hem and a ring on her hand, and she felt a light weight on her head, a small circle diadem. The king faced her, took her hand and bowed low, and said, "You will always be a princess as long as I am your brother." Amanda looked at the king's eyes. All at once, relief, warm and wonderful, flooded her. She threw back her head and laughed. The celebrants heard it. They'd been waiting for months. Princess Amanda was laughing again. Mercy gathered Amanda into her arms, swept her up, and together they joined the dance that began the great celebration. The king walked over to Hero. He placed his arm around the young man's shoulders. "Come," he said, "I have a place saved for you beside me." At the banquet table, Hero sat next to the king. He ate the chief baker's bread and thought nothing ever tasted so good. He watched the two silly knights tell stories and sang the court songs and applauded the apprentice juggler and laughed because he was part of this good company. After a while, the king said, "Hero, I have a task for you. I wonder if you will have the courage to undertake it." For the first time in a long while, Hero touched his cheek with his fingertips. He could feel the rough edge of the scar. He was surprised that it was still there, and even more surprised that it did not seem to matter anymore. The king continued, "I need a king's man to live in Enchanted City. It's time to begin the restoration of the kingdom. I need someone with a hero's heart, someone who knows the ways of the enchanter. Will you come?" Hero choked on the morsel of bread he had been chewing. He stammered, "But I just..." The king laughed. "I know, you just made entrance. I will not be leaving for a while. Take some time. Learn the ways of the kingdom. Enjoy the great celebration. Learn from Mercy. Walk with Ranger Commander. When you are ready, I will call you." Hero looked into the king's eyes. Go back to the enchanter and his burners? How strange it is that I would do anything for this man. But were there king's men in Enchanted City? Hero remembered a taxi driver who shouted, "To the king!" so long ago. Yes, maybe there were. The king knew Hero's thoughts. "It will be worth all the danger, Hero. I have work for you to do." He stood and turned to leave the table. Suddenly, Hero had a terrible thought. "But, sir, how will I find you in Enchanted City? Will you be in disguise?" The king laughed again. He reached across the table and firmly clasped the hand of the new celebrant. "That's right. You never were very good at sighting." Then he leaned over and whispered, "It won't be hard for you to find me. I will have a scar just like yours." So the princess found King's love, and the boy became the king's man. and discovered that one goes into inmost circle in order to come out again. Entrance is only the beginning of the quest.